Chapter 16 New Stoves and Stages. Part 1, Tomato Day. The first day of soup began with onions and steam. Claire unlocked the willow house at dawn. The bell breathed once. Margaret arrived in an apron, Evan with 2 stockpots, Sophie with a clipboard titled Soup Math, and Joy with a toolbox because even soup relied on screws. "We keep it simple," Claire said, sliding tomatoes into the blender. "Tomato today, lentil tomorrow, no revolution until the bowls stop wobbling." Sophie taped a sign to the window, "Pay what you can, tell us if you can't," and another beneath the tip jar, "For lamps, lids, and late nights." Lily lettered the chalkboard. Mara lined up bowls. Theo tested the bell and declared it humble. By 8:30 the room warmed with nurses and early lunchers. Denise arrived from St. Mary's. "The generator sends its regards," she announced, accepting 2 cups for the lab. Claire ladled, listened, and learned soup's secret. People confessed to it. A roofer said heights were frightening again. The bell kept a steady pulse. Near 10 Naomi called. "Hamilton wants your answer." "Yes," Claire said, surprised by how firmly the word stood. Title, "Making Rooms That Hold." 10 minutes, then a panel. "Keep my bio plain." "Plain is a weapon," Naomi said. "We'll use it well. He'll be there last slot." "He'll sit in back," Claire said, as much to herself as to Naomi. After she hung up, she texted Nathaniel, "I'm speaking at Hamilton. 10 minutes. Small room preferred." His reply came fast. "I'll take a chair at the wall and not touch the dimmer." At 10:30 a man with a clipboard and a jacket that said county appeared. "Routine check," he announced. "Anonymous complaint about permits and drains." "Welcome," Claire said. "Joy, show him the seam, the breaker, the binder." Joy produced documentation with the calm of a sermon. Evan lifted lids. The inspector sniffed, read, crouched, nodded. "Anonymous callers rarely mention that a place is this tidy," he said, scribbling a signature. "You're fine." He left with a scone. When the door shut, Lily whispered, "Who complains about soup?" "Someone who likes their chair empty," Claire said, and returned to the ladle. At noon the gray sedan parked a block away and stayed a memory. Nathaniel had texted earlier, "Board locked. I'll spare your line my name." She read it twice and did not miss him, but noticed the space where he wasn't. The rush swelled and softened. Soup ran out at 1:15, scones at 1:40. Claire wrote sorry, sold out, back at 8 tomorrow, and braced for disappointment. Instead, a mechanic pressed a 5 into the jar and said, "Keep the lights true." During the lull, Victoria appeared, raincoat hood down, hair threaded with silver. She bought a coffee, paid double, and passed Claire a card. "A linen supplier who doesn't punish small orders," she said. "Mention the Willow House, not me." "Thank you," Claire said. "And the diamond?" "Will continue being a rock," Victoria said. "I intend to be a person." They smiled, women who had chosen rooms over symbols, and moved on. At 2, Ortiz drifted through in a baseball cap, bought soup he didn't eat, and left it with the note, "For the woman in the cornflower cardigan who reads her letters slowly." It found her. She wept once and stayed. Afternoon loosened. Theo practiced counting change by 5s. Mara wiped the long table like a ritual. Lily labeled a jar lost things. Claire drafted bullet points for Hamilton on an index card. Costs. Choices. Quiet. Bells. Proof isn't weight. Rooms instead of headlines. At 3:30 an email dropped from the auction house press office. The diamond had sold to a foundation, funds directed to research at St. Mary's. No names. The city would argue over its romance. Willowbrook would bank the grant. Claire forwarded it to Denise. A stream of exclamation points arrived like confetti. She sent it to Nathaniel as well. "Good outcome." He answered, "The right kind of loud." Around 4, the fox trotted past with a scrap of white paper maybe, and disappeared between hedges. Sophie slid onto the stool beside the register. "Robert published a column about weather," she said. "Clouds. No outsiders." "May he forecast forever," Claire said. They closed at 6 to a last bell and a room that smelled like tomatoes and clean. After the till was counted and the chalkboard washed, Claire walked the block in the early blue of evening, rehearsing sentences to a hall she refused to let intimidate her. When she returned, Margaret had packed leftovers for Mrs. Green. Evan had left sandpaper for a step that didn't listen. Joy had taped a note to the breaker, "You're doing great, sweetie," that made Claire laugh. At home, she spread the index card beside a mug and added 2 words at the bottom. "Invite Grace." Then she let herself imagine Nathaniel at the back of a lecture hall, not commanding from the front, but listening the way she had, once upon another beginning. It felt like a circle finding its next edge. She emailed the dean. A modest room, no stagecraft, a bell if they had one. Sophie texted a soup spreadsheet with 3 columns: pots, bowls, breath. Claire replied yes to both, folded the index card, and turned off the kitchen light. Her phone buzzed. Julian. He's practicing questions that don't lead the witness. Also, he bought filters in bulk and asked how to say humility in procurement. She wrote back, tell him humility is a verb, not a line item. See you Saturday for the retreat clause. Before sleep, she stood on the porch between red and white roses and realized neither had to win for the garden to grow. She chose the bloom that faced the house, then set her alarm for an hour earlier than wisdom, because soup was an early language and she had committed to speaking it well. The night held. The river conversed with stones. Somewhere, a lecture hall waited for a bell. Morning thinned into a deliberate afternoon, the willow house catching its breath between ladles and lists. Claire wiped the long table, turned the dimmer a notch, and set her index card beside the red paperweight. The words steadied her. Costs. Choices. Quiet. Bells. Proof isn't weight. Sophie arrived with 2 folding chairs and a grin. Lecture hall simulation, she said. We boo only if you quote yourself. I won't, Claire replied. I barely like hearing me once. They arranged the chairs at the back wall. Evan stuck a painter's tape line across the floor. Your stage, he said. Stay on this side so you don't pace into metaphor. Joy adjusted the bell's pull so it would ring with less bravado. If they don't have a bell, bring ours, she advised. Let a room learn a better habit. Borrowed reverence, Sophie said, approving. They practiced. Claire spoke to a crowd of 2 in the plant named Leverage. She described rooms as promises you keep with your hands. She talked about the cost of replacing wires and the cheaper cost of learning people's names. She lifted the bell and rang it once. Good, Sophie said. You sound like a human who built a place, not a brochure. Fewer semicolons, Evan added, deadpan. She laughed, crossed out one, kept another. It felt like an edit she could trust. Naomi called while they reset chairs. Panel order shifted, she said. You're second. QA moderated. He's still closing. Fine, Claire said. If they try to make a reunion, I'll make it a syllabus. You're very bored with spectacle, Naomi noted. I'm proud. An email pinged from the dean, a polite reminder that press might hover outside the hall and that narrative synergy was possible. Claire replied with a sentence she'd learned to mean, I'm here to talk about rooms. At 4, a florist delivered a small bouquet tied with string, sprigs of rosemary and thistle, a quietly ferocious arrangement. The card read, for courage you already have. No name. She put it beside Leverage and thought of all the people who had learned to help without signatures. The gray sedan didn't appear. Nathaniel's text did. Board ran long. I'll drive at dawn. Chair at the wall, promise. She typed back, bring a notebook. Don't raise your hand unless you must. Define must, he wrote. If someone lies and silence would injure a room, she answered. Copy, he said. Late afternoon brought a small hiccup. A thread on a city forum paired a cropped photo of Claire at the Orion Toast with a new shot of the Willow House line, captioned, Rebrand Speedrun. It had the greasy confidence of a drive-by. Sophie showed her. We can ignore. Let's redirect, Claire said. She snapped a photo of Denise standing by the generator panel and posted it to the Willow House page with 5 words. Your donations kept this humming. No hashtags. No explanations. The thread wilted. By 5, they'd prepped for morning. Tomatoes roasted, onions chopped, sign rewritten with fresh chalk. Claire laid out a navy dress that looked like work and a red scarf that looked like nerve. Margaret ironed both with the tenderness of a spell. Evan offered to drive, was overruled, offered snacks, 1. He and Sophie packed a bag with almonds and kindness. Joy tucked a tiny screwdriver into the pocket of Claire's tote. For lecterns that wobble, she said. As the light thinned, the fox crossed, unhurried, then paused at the step as if reading the jobs board. You're hired, Sophie told it. Night watch. Claire walked to the roses. The white blooms had browned at the edges. The red kept refusing to be quiet. She trimmed one spent petal and left the rest to keep arguing with weather. Back inside, she rehearsed once more, this time imagining a hallway outside the hall where she and Nathaniel had once reversed positions. Her in a seat, him at a podium. She let the memory pass through without catching. The version she carried now held fewer angles and more chairs. The phone buzzed. Julian, he's nervous. Don't tell him I told you. He asked how to clap without making a room look at him. I said 2 quiet hands. Teach him to borrow reverence, she replied and added a bell emoji she almost deleted, then didn't. Evening gathered around the windows. The town's lamps blinked awake. A travel mug waited on the counter, washed, ready. The thermos he'd given her returned and reused until it felt like an object that believed in second purposes. Margaret slid a tin of shortbread into Claire's bag. "For the drive home," she said. "Sugar when courage burns hot." "Is it obvious I'm afraid?" Claire asked. "It's obvious you care," Margaret said. "Fear is the invoice love pays to show up." Claire kissed her mother's cheek and locked the door to a room that no longer needed her to stand watch to remain itself. That, she decided, was the truest progress she knew. At home she set 2 alarms and a third she'd ignore. Her talk sat folded on the dresser, plain as a recipe. She read it once aloud to the mirror and startled at the steadiness. Then she wrote one more line in pencil at the bottom. Invite them to imagine their own belle. When she finally slept, the river kept its low conversation with stone. In the small hours she dreamt of a lecture hall with windows, of a man in the last row listening with his whole attention, of a bell that rang once and was answered not by applause but by people standing to go build something tender and strong. Dawn would ask her to share the work. She would say yes again. The rest, foxes, filters, boardrooms, columns, could orbit without deciding her center. She had chosen it already. She turned off the lamp, placed the bell in her bag, and smiled without needing permission tonight. Chapter 17, Bells and Halls. Part 1, Return to Hamilton. Dawn put silver on the highway and courage in the thermos. Claire drove with the window cracked, the smell of wet cedar riding shotgun. Sophie rode beside her with a folder and almonds ration-like strategy. The bell sat wrapped in a tea towel in Claire's tote, heavier than its size, honest as a tool. "Rules," Sophie said as they passed the city limits. "No apologizing for survival. No giving away credit that belongs to your hands. If anyone calls you someone's muse, I will bite the microphone." "I'll bring you a napkin," Claire said. Hamilton rose from red brick and trees. The lecture hall smelled like dusted seats and coffee. Naomi waved from the back row, headset askew. "Press outside," she said. "Panel at 10. You at 11:15. No pyrotechnics except whatever you do with the bell." "Borrowed reverence," Claire said. They did a sound check. The microphone respected her voice. Margaret texted, "Stand straight. Come home." The first speaker, a contractor who'd rebuilt a bakery, talked about insurance. The second turned venture money into parables. Claire listened, writing like the student who had once met a man at a podium and mistaken precision for safety. A message slid across her screen from a Hamilton number. "Do you require accommodations for the bell?" She typed back, "A table and a small permission." The reply, "Granted." At 10:30, the moderator found Claire in the wings. "Relax," she said. "Talk like you're handing someone a list." "I am," Claire replied. She took the stage to a room that felt like a held breath. The bell sat on the table, unassuming. Claire rested her fingers on its curve and felt steadier. "Rooms are promises," she began. "You keep them with your hands." She spoke without ornament. She told them what wires cost, what a breaker sounds like when it obeys, how soup buys a town 2 quiet hours. She explained that proof, demanded by people who want to own the story, is not weight a woman should carry, that she'd learned to set down the stones and hold the door instead. She rang the bell once. The sound was small and traveled anyway. "Quiet is a style," she said. "Not absence. Not retreat. It's the room deciding who gets to speak first." The questions were respectful until one wasn't. A student with a gleam of crusade stood, phone lifted. "How do you answer critics who say you romanticize smallness while benefiting from proximity to a billionaire?" Claire did not look at the back row. "By telling the truth," she said. "Proximity doesn't pay invoices. Work does. A check can help, it can't build your hands. I kept my job until I could resign without collapsing. Then I left and painted walls. My town feeds me more than headlines ever could." Another hand. "Do you consider your red dress a strategy?" She smiled. "I consider it a color. Strategy is chair glides and filters." Laughter, relieved, recognizing itself. From the aisle, the dean lifted a hand. "You brought a bell." "I did," Claire said. "Because a room learns what we ask of it. I want this one to remember that welcome can be summoned without spectacle." She rang it again, softer. Heads tilted. When it ended, they clapped like people who had learned something with their shoulders. Naomi met her in the wings and hugged her quick. "You were a library with windows," she said. The panel convened. The contractor, a banker, Claire, and a nonprofit director with laugh lines like commas. They traded specifics, permits, cash flow, the arithmetic of patience. Claire spoke when it added value, she passed praise sideways. And then it was his turn. Nathaniel slipped into the last row 2 minutes before, gray sweater, no entourage, a notebook. He looked like a man practicing humility and finding muscles he hadn't used. When the moderator introduced him, he walked down the aisle without appetite and set his notebook on the lectern like an apology. Leverage after crisis, he began. Most of you have heard me talk about control. A ghost of a smile. I used to think it meant setting the terms and winning. Recently I conceded board seats to kill a proxy and discovered the strength in not getting my way. He did not look at Claire. He did not mention Orion. He spoke numbers and then their ethics. When to accept a smaller return so the people carrying the weight could sleep. When to stop using symbols as substitutes for choices. He said the word we more than I. When a student asked about romantic distractions, he said simply, work clarifies, and moved on. Midway through, he paused, glanced toward the table and said, may I borrow that? Claire met his eyes for the first time and decided yes. He lifted the bell, waited, and rang it once. The sound tapped the ribs of the hall. This is what rooms sound like when we're paying attention, he said. Let's try to deserve it. The applause felt different, less heat, more weight. He returned the bell to Claire with both hands, nodded to the dean, and stepped away from the light. In the mingling after, Claire took precisely the conversation she needed and none she didn't. A professor asked for her reading list. A janitor thanked her for mentioning chair glides. A student with paint under her nails said, I thought I had to leave to matter. Maybe I just have to build. Either can be true, Claire said. Choose on purpose. Outside, red leaves flirted with wind and promised honest weather. By the doors, Nathaniel waited, a man in a hallway where he used to command the room. He didn't reach for her. Lunch at the cafe? He asked. Tray, not reservation. 15 minutes, she said. I promised the dean a quote. I'll save us 2 seats that aren't important, he answered and went to stand in line. The campus cafe had linoleum floors and the smell of grilled cheese. Nathaniel stood in line like a man learning patience in public. Claire arrived with Sophie, handed him a tray and stepped back to keep space honest. No reserved tables, he said. Good, she replied. We'll share with whoever needs chairs. They ended up across from a sophomore and a janitor on break. Nathaniel poured water for everyone like it was a language he'd neglected. The sophomore recognized him, blinked twice, and chose curiosity over awe. You guest lecture sometimes, she said. Today sounded different. I'm practicing a different kind of leverage, he answered. The janitor tapped his knuckles on the tabletop. You mentioned chair glides. We need those in the old library. I'll buy a box, Nathaniel said, then stopped himself and looked at Claire. Buy 2, she said. 1 for here, 1 for Willowbrook. They ate. Wind ticked leaves against a window. Claire's pulse settled into the simple math of soup, bread, apple. She could do this. Words that didn't ask for applause, a man who had decided to be small, a tray that steadied her hands. Thank you for the bell, Nathaniel said, quiet. It was alone, she said. You returned it. I meant the permission. Also alone. She met his gaze and refused to pretend the air wasn't warmer where their attention touched. Terms renewed daily. The sophomore left. The janitor returned to a cart that squeaked like an unedited sentence. The table was theirs. I didn't look at you during the talk, Nathaniel said. I noticed, she replied. It helped. He breathed out. I keep making lists of what not to do around you. It's a better discipline than pretending I don't want anything. What do you want? Claire asked. The question surprised them both by sounding simple. To be allowed to keep showing up, he said. To pay for chair glides and filters and never once turn them into a symbol. To be the person you call when the step doesn't listen. That last one you've earned, she said. The rest you're still auditioning for. A reporter appeared at the end of the aisle. Ms. Bennett, Mr. Cross, 1 photo? No, Claire said not unkindly. Lunch, not a story. Nathaniel lifted his tray. We're returning these, he said and carried plates to the bin. When he sat again, his smile held a private joke. Julian says you domesticate tyrants by handing them dishes. I don't domesticate, she said. I assign chores. Fair. He reached into his pocket and placed a small brass tag on the table. Willow House stamped in tidy type, a hole for a keyring. For your spare keys. If it's too much, I'll use it on my own. She turned it over. It wasn't luxury, it was hardware. It's not a claim? It's a label, he said. I am finally learning the difference. Then thank you. She slid it into her bag. They walked after, past the hall where she had first heard him say leverage, through a quadrangle that smelled like wet stone. kept his hands in his pockets. She kept her pace half a stride ahead, a habit she no longer needed but honored anyway. I said yes to the symposium because I wanted to mark a route between then and now, she said. Not for nostalgia. For evidence. You built the route, he said. I'm lucky it still has room for my feet. Boundaries, she said. One for the list. Don't post about the Willow House without checking with me. Agreed. Don't call me past 10 unless the house is on fire. Agreed. Don't send gifts you wouldn't leave in a toolbox. He smiled. Agreed. And if I say no to dinner, you don't translate it into maybe. His expression sobered. Agreed, he said, the syllables careful. They reached the parking lot. A gust curled her hair against her temple. He didn't reach to tuck it back. Will you come tonight? He asked. Dinner that isn't a performance. Soup at your table or mine. Tonight I go home, she said. Tomorrow I feed a town. Then we'll see. Then we'll see, he echoed, accepting the ordinary as if it were holy. Sophie pulled up with the car. We're stealing her, she called. Nathaniel opened Claire's door, then stepped back like a man learning to stop where a line asks him to. Drive safe, he said. Live well, she returned. They left him in the side mirror, a tall figure with his hands in his pockets, a notebook under his arm, the hall behind him and a different kind of room ahead. Claire laughed once, the sound unexpected and clean. On the highway, Sophie lowered the window an inch. You were good, she said. He was good. This version might actually work. It only works, Claire said, if we keep choosing small things over announcements. So, Sophie said practical. Tomorrow, filters, soup, and a call to the linen supplier Victoria sent. And a schedule for the teenagers, Claire added. And a bench that needs a second coat. And a boundary that didn't break today, Sophie concluded, pleased. We keep that. They drove toward the river. The thermos held enough for 2 sips at the county line. Claire took hers and thought of a brass tag that was not a claim, a bell that made rooms behave, and a man who had finally learned how to return something borrowed without asking for applause. She wanted her house, her list, her town, the life that required witnesses because it served them coffee. She tightened her hands on the wheel and let gratitude behave without speech. Tomorrow would want her again. She would say yes, and then she would say yes again, not to a man, not yet, but to a room that proved love best when it gave other people a place to sit and breathe. Chapter 18, Lines That Hold. Part 1, The County Room. The morning after Hamilton tasted like almond dust and relief. Claire opened the Willow House at 7, rang the bell once, and set the thermos Sophie had smuggled into her bag on the counter like proof nerves can turn into fuel. The day's list was practical. Filters, soup, a call to the linen supplier Victoria had sent, but the margin held a bolder line. County Business Forum, 6 p.m., Town Hall. Robert will be there, Sophie said, flipping the open sign. He'll try to turn a microphone into a match. Then we bring water, Claire said. Coffee counts. They worked the morning. Nurses redeeming cards, teachers buying courage, Lily lettering soup. Lentil, Evan coaxing a second coat on the bench, Joy scheduling a hinge for repentance. At noon, Denise brought a folder. Agenda, she said. Public comment at the end. Sheriff present. Ortiz will walk by coincidentally. Coincidence is a skill, Sophie murmured. Claire skimmed the packet. One item wore Robert's fingerprints. Concerns regarding outside influence in small-town enterprises. It didn't name the Willow House. It didn't need to. She texted Nathaniel a courtesy. County forum tonight. You don't need to come. He replied, I won't make the room about me. Call if you need a doorway. She typed, keep editing. Afternoon slid easy. The fox crossed twice. The plant named Leverage tried. At 4, the county clerk confirmed occupancy numbers. Claire recited them like a prayer learned by doing. They closed early to prep. Margaret packed scones as insurance against speeches. Evan loaded folding chairs. Sophie slipped the bell into her tote like a talisman with manners. Claire wore the navy dress from Hamilton and boots that could hold a line. Town hall smelled of dust and floor polish. Old portraits stared down like a committee that loved gossip and good sense. The room filled fast. Farmers, nurses, kids in hoodies, the pastor with his calendar, Mrs. Lynn with a thermos labeled Hope. Robert arrived with a photographer and 2 men who made space by not making eye contact. Budgets and streetlights came first. Claire offered a short update. Open mornings, soup some days, rooms soon, paid by work and a small loan. She stopped there. The room needed oxygen, not decoration. Public comment opened. Robert stood, smile curated. I've got concerns, he said into the microphone, letting the S hum. Folks say we're a backdrop for city people to launder reputation. Anonymous donations, anonymous cars, an executive who pops in to be seen. Meanwhile, locals jump hoops for permits. Murmurs. Sophie's hand brushed the bell. Names? The clerk warned. Robert's smile behaved. Issues, sure. But we all know what we mean. When a woman leaves and comes back with a man's money, the town should ask who owns the keys. Claire stood. She didn't take the mic. Keys are metal, not metaphors, she said. Mine hang by the door. The Willow House is funded by savings, a credit union loan, and invoices you're welcome to examine during business hours. Yes, friends help. They carried chairs. They bought filters. They did not buy me. Robert lifted his chin. So if the city man stops visiting, your doors stay open? They do, Claire said. Because a nurse paid for coffee, a mechanic bought light, teenagers stacked chairs kindly. That's the math. A woman in a cornflower cardigan rose. I read my husband's letter in that lobby and didn't feel alone, she said. Mrs. Lynn raised her thermos. My generator hums. Next concern? Laughter loose in the air. And Evan? Robert tried. Folks assume. Evan stood calm as a level. Assume something else, he said. We're partners in paint and patience. Not in vows. From the back wall, the sheriff cleared his throat. Comment, not character. Robert regrouped. Last point, outsiders bring trouble. We had a suspicious car circling for days. Coincidence? Ortiz, coincidentally in the doorway, lifted his cap. We traced the rental, he said, friendly as weather that decides to hold. Not local. Not returning. The clerk nodded to Claire. Anything to add? She took the mic now because sometimes the room deserves a name attached. Yes. I left. I learned. I came back with hands that know how to make rooms hold. If you want help with a hinge or a grant or a letter you can't open alone, Willow House has coffee and a bell. That's the offer. No symbols required. Applause started left and moved like tide. Even the portraits frowned less. After the gavel, people lined up without being told, to volunteer for Saturday's lunch, to ask Joy about wiring, to hand Claire envelopes with receipts for donated paint. Robert hovered, then retreated when hovering failed to feed him. On the steps, a small bouquet waited, rosemary and thistle, with a card. When rooms hold, rumors don't. No signature. Appropriate. Sophie squeezed Claire's elbow. You didn't shake. I did, Claire said. Just not where it shows. The night felt colder after the lights. Claire loaded chairs, thanked the clerk, and turned toward the car. Across the street, a gray sedan idled with its lights off. Her breath caught, then eased when the driver stepped into the glow. Nathaniel, hands visible, presence small on purpose. I stayed across the block, he said. No photos. No disruptions. Only a car if you needed it. I didn't, she said. But thank you for waiting. He nodded, accepting the non-roll. Drive safe. Live well, she answered, and the ritual felt less like defense and more like permission. At home, Margaret set out mugs. How was the room? She asked. Honest, Claire said. It shows. Margaret smiled. So did you. Claire lay awake later, not because fear demanded, but because possibility asked politely. She had kept a room without help and accepted help without surrender. Could be both. Tomorrow would want soup again. She would say yes, then decide what kind of yes she could afford to keep giving and to whom. The town hall's echo had faded by the time Claire reached the Willow House. She unlocked, turned on a single lamp, and let the room settle. The smell of polish and lentils, the hush after work. She set the rosemary and thistle beside the red paperweight and wrote 2 lines. Inventory bulbs. Thank the sheriff. Work first. Her phone hummed. Naomi, forum clip is circulating. You look unflappable. Claire sent a thumbs up, then silenced the screen. Sophie arrived, hair wind-tossed. You didn't let him turn the mic into a match. He ran out of kindling, Claire said. Your mother baked for victory. Sophie set a tin down. Also, the Saturday hires formed a group chat called Q Crew. Lily wants to stencil aprons. They can pitch Monday, Claire said. Only with Joy-approved paint. They ate shortbread at the long table. After Sophie left, Claire swept grit from under the bench. The small order steadied her. The bell breathed once. Evan with a box of filters and a tired smile. A last practical gift. It is, she said. How's your mother? And Mrs. Green? Both fine enough to critique my driving. He tipped his head toward the door. Sheriff says the SUV's operator won't enjoy county hospitality again. Ortiz confirmed. Still, visibility. Agreed, Claire said. She glanced at the bouquet. Someone understands thistles. So do you, he said, and fixed a stubborn hinge with a single tap that sounded like permission. Claire locked up, bag over shoulder, Belle sleeping. Night had sharpened into stars. She walked to Margaret's with her spine unbent. Margaret poured tea. You told the town a clean truth, she said. It felt like sweeping, Claire answered. Her phone buzzed again. Nathaniel, at the county line. Can I call? She stepped onto the porch. Call, she typed. I listened from a parking lot radio, he said when the line connected. You were precise. Safer than brave, she said. I'm learning to prefer safe words where you're concerned. Pause. There's a contract in your inbox labeled plumbing. September retreat. No metaphors, no press. A clause letting you cancel if we misbehave. I'll read it Sunday. Tonight belongs to silence. I'm trying to honor those. He hesitated. One more sentence? Careful. I'm not asking you for an answer, he said, gentle, but I'm in love with the way you build a life, and I'm learning to be in love without demanding a witness. Something braced and softened at once. I heard you, she said. Now hang up before my mother adopts you. He smiled into the line. Yes, ma'am. Drive safe. Live well, she answered. Sleep found her quickly. Morning brought rain rinsing the porch and a fox shaking itself like a small lightning bolt. She showered, tied her hair, and drafted the next list. Soup, linens, hire schedules, call the supplier, thank Victoria, ring at 8. Saturday unfurled in the key of service. The St. Mary's thank you lunch ran on casseroles and applause without microphones. Claire manned a coffee urn. Evan negotiated outlets. Joy befriended a sulking warmer. Ortiz served pie in anonymity. Nurses laughed like people who'd slept. The generator hummed steady. Back at the Willow House, Mara practiced the register. Theo stacked chairs, proud of 13 going clean to 20. Lily sketched a stencil. Breathe. Approved, Claire said. Small near the door. Nathaniel texted nothing because she hadn't asked. It felt like respect. Near dusk, the gray sedan passed through town without stopping. Claire walked the rooms, turned lamp dials to evening, and stood in the doorway with exhaustion that felt like completion. Margaret dropped off soup for tomorrow. Sophie taped a notice, closed Monday for floor polish, with flourish. Evan penciled measurements for shelves that would forgive clumsy elbows. On her way home, Claire saw Robert under the hardware awning, phone slack in his hand, anger cooled to something smaller. He lifted a hand in a non-salute. She nodded back, a truce that wasn't reconciliation. Night laid itself over Willowbrook. On her porch, between white and red roses, Claire wrote 3 sentences on an index card for her bedside drawer. I choose rooms over rumors. I choose work over spectacle. I will not love anyone who asks me to be less than loud in the quiet I earned. Before bed, Julian texted. He watched the stream from a parking lot like a reformed sinner at the back pew. Not my metaphor. He's learning. Claire smiled and typed, tell him the pew is fine. The door's finer. Julian replied with a photo of 2 boxes labeled chair glides. Then, I'll drive them down next week if you promise not to put me on soup duty. You're on bell duty, she sent. We're all learning reverence. She skimmed the plumbing attachment long enough to see the clause that let her cancel without penalty, then closed the file. Sunday would be soon enough for signatures. Tonight she chose smaller work. She oiled the garden shears, checked the flashlight batteries, and rewound the twine on the jobs board pen. None of it changed the world. All of it made tomorrow easier, which was the only lever she trusted these days. She slid the card away and turned out the light. Rain ticked steady. A train called once in the distance. The house answered by staying. Claire slept hard, woke twice, and found no fear waiting on the pillow before dawn. Miles away, in a high apartment that had learned restraint, a man set his phone down without sending a second message and wrote instead in a notebook, bring filters. Carry chairs. Ask permission. Ring once. Then he slept beside a penciled calendar entry for September. The river moved through dark, shoulder to shoulder with its banks. The Willow House kept its hum. Somewhere between them, a line held, not a wall, not a leash, only a measured distance that made space for walking toward without erasing how far they had each already come. Chapter 19, Winter Terms. Part 1, Frost and Rumor. December arrived like a clean blade. Willowbrook woke to frost on mailbox flags and the river breathing smoke. The Willow House learned winter the way a room should, slowly, respectfully, by adjusting the dimmer and serving soup that remembered heat. Claire chalked a sign, rooms open December 28th, and taped it inside the window with twine that had behaved all year. 2 weeks, Sophie said, blowing into her gloves. Do we believe in sheets that tuck themselves? We believe in corners that admit defeat, Claire said. We tuck them anyway. Evan measured the last shelf in the hallway. Joy coaxed one more secret out of the breaker. Margaret wrapped scones for teachers who graded through snow. The fox crossed with the dignity of a minister late for vespers. At noon, Naomi called from a city sidewalk that sounded like sleet. Heads up. Gala photos tonight. Victoria is hosting a foundation dinner. If cameras catch her and Nathaniel in the same frame, a blog will claim destiny. Let them, Claire said, arranging cups. We sell coffee, not fate. Understood, Naomi said, then added gently. He asked me not to warn you. I ignored him. Boundaries are easier if everyone respects the same map. After close, Claire walked home through a blue cold that clarified. She rinsed a mug, wrote a list, linens, hooks, keys, and sat with the quiet until it agreed to stay. When her phone buzzed, she braced, then answered. Julian. He's attending, seated 3 tables away. No speeches, no French. He'll leave early. Thank you, she typed. Tell him I'm not a test he can pass by standing near restraint. Copy, Julian said. Also, he bought chair glides for a library, then pretended he didn't. Claire smiled despite herself, then turned the phone face down and chose sleep. The next morning began with fog low as a thought. Before 9, a columnist posted a split screen. Victoria in white at the gala, Nathaniel in winter black. Caption. White remembers, red invents. Robert shared it with relish. Comment threads braided speculation and boredom. At 10, the county inspector returned with a clipboard and something like apology. Final sign-off for the rooms, he said. And a note. My wife says your lentil makes her kinder. Then bring a thermos, Claire said, and initialed where winter required. By afternoon, the soft opening lobby matched the weather. Generous and unsentimental. Denise brought nurses who had survived a 12 and wanted cups that forgave their hands. Lily lettered a small placard, "No crowns, just chairs," and set it near the long table like a counterspell. Near 3, Nathaniel's text arrived without flourish. I didn't stay at the gala. I carried boxes at the library instead. Proud of your date on the window. Claire read it twice, then pocketed the phone the way one puts away a sharp object. At dusk, the Orion posted its New Year's teaser. Scaffolds laced with light, a caption hinting at a finale. Naomi forwarded the graphic with a line. If you need a city room that night, say so. He'll be in one regardless, but not the center. Claire stared at the screen until the cold pressed her back into motion. She counted pillows, checked locks, wrote thank you on 3 envelopes for trades who had extended grace. At closing, she found a bouquet on the step. Winter roses, red and white both, ribbon plain. No card. She carried them inside, trimmed the stems, and set them between the bell and the paperweight. Margaret arrived with stew and opinion. He's trying gently, she said, not asking how Claire felt. The roses answered enough. He's trying publicly, Claire said. Gentle is proven in absence of applause. Margaret stirred the pot as if it required moral alignment. Can you live with his learning curve? I can live with mine, Claire said. His is his. That night she drafted a note she didn't plan to send. Some doors open for quiet, not declarations. I won't walk through to be photographed. She saved it in her head and slept. Snow fell in the city during the gala's after-party. Photos landed with the inevitability of weather. Victoria at a balcony, Nathaniel lean at an exit, a caption that forgot he had hands. The next morning, Robert posted a pre-written moral about red dresses and ambition. It read like someone who had never carried a chair. At noon, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway of the Willow House with a paper bag and the humility of someone who had driven thinking, not rehearsing. The bell breathed once. He waited while a teenager counted coins, then stepped up with his offering. Filters, bulbs, an envelope labeled September, retreat terms. Plumbing, Claire said, accepting it. Not poetry. Plumbing, he agreed. They worked side by side in silence until the room had no patience for silence. He glanced at the roses and then away, as if refusing to ask for credit he couldn't earn. May I ask you to dinner? He said finally. No cameras. No declarations. Somewhere nobody knows my last name. No, Claire said, gentle and blunt. Not now. He absorbed the answer, not flinching. Then may I ask why plainly? Because your trying keeps leaving breadcrumbs for witnesses, she said. Because every rumor assumes a script where I'm the lesson. Because you've learned to arrive small in my rooms, but your world still wants you large in theirs. She set down the rag, looked at him without flinching. Because I am tired. He nodded once. Claire. It's too late, she said and heard the iron in it. I don't want you any more. The sentence surprised them both by standing. The room received it without breaking. Outside, the river held its breath. Inside, the bell did not ring. She lifted the roses, split the bouquet, and gave half to Mrs. Green on her way home. Kindness traveled divided. Behind her, Nathaniel set the filters, nodded to the doorpost, and left quietly without asking permission. Sophie found her on the back steps with the roses divided into 2 jars like a judgment rendered. Claire's hands were steady and sore. You said it, Sophie murmured, sitting. The sentence. I did, Claire said. And nothing collapsed. Except maybe him. I can't measure that, Claire answered. I can only measure rooms. They carried 1 jar to Mrs. Green and left the other by the register, red and white made honest by water. Claire wiped the counter and wrote tomorrow's list under the placard, and no crowns, just chairs. Work gathered, linens, hooks, keys, a call to the linen supplier Victoria had sent, extra blankets for the coming glass. Julian texted after dark. He left quiet. Office lights off. No post. He asked me not to tell you anything unless it involved safety. She turned the phone face down. Days compacted into weather and labor. Joy installed the last dimmer and wrote a date inside the breaker door like a blessing. Evan rehung doors that had opinions. Denise scheduled nurses to try the coffee before nights. Mara learned to sweep around conversations without erasing them. Theo graduated from change to mugs. Lily lettered room 3, starlings with a hand that made guests feel chosen. On the 28th, Willow House opened its rooms. Morning arrived blue and bright. Claire ironed the last pillowcase, then stood in each room and asked the air to practice kindness. The first guest checked in, a couple with a newborn, an algebra teacher whose furnace had gone theatrical, a woman headed to her sister. Keys warmed palms. The bell behaved as if promise could be taught. Robert hovered near noon, then approached with a notebook. Full, he asked. Enough, Claire said. I'm writing about rooms, he said, almost apologizing. Then sit in one, she said. Write from the chair you borrow. He did. The piece that night was brief and unmistakably kind. He called the Willow House a place that holds fatigue without asking it to perform. 4 people booked room 2 hearth, within the hour. Gala chatter cooled. Naomi sent a photo of Orion's scaffolds testing against snow. Fireworks will go up with or without a story, she wrote. Claire replied with a folded quilt and let the contrast speak. Snow arrived on the 30th, soft as forgiveness. Guests patted the hallway in socks. Laughter went quiet after 10. Joy replaced a bulb at dawn with the reverence of a priest. That afternoon, an envelope in Naomi's tidy hand slid under the door. Inside, 2 cards. Orion New Year's Eve, community honorees. A note. St. Mary's, the generator, the fundraiser, you're being thanked. No speeches. Come if you want the view. Claire carried it to Denise. Go, Denise said. It's for the nurses. 4 quarters and pies. Take a picture and send it back with a caption that says only thank you. Claire put the card in her tote and told herself nothing had changed. Guests still needed maps to breakfast, the fox still crossed between 3 and 4, the kettle still wanted watching. Near dusk, Julian called. He'll be there, he said. Back row. Not your problem. It isn't, she said, meaning it, feeling the ache that shadows meaning when history has a face. Also, Julian added, the library chairs glide like contrition. New Year's Eve morning broke knife bright. Claire set out scones, checked the stair seam, let Margaret insist on hair and lipstick because cameras are rude. Sophie packed tea and an exit plan. Evan offered the truck, then to keep the desk. You go, Claire said. Let the rooms prove they can stand on their own spines. She put on the navy coat, tied red silk at her throat like resolve, and checked the bell. It breathed once. The fox crossed, unconcerned with fireworks or vows. In the car, the envelope lay on the console. Claire drove toward the city, the river at her side like a companion that preferred brevity. Snow flurried and died. The skyline lifted. On the bridge she slowed for a plow throwing sparks, watched the city sharpen and decided what she would not do. She would not scan a room for him, would not translate fireworks into messages, would not let applause rename her work. She practiced the sentences out loud. Pour coffee. Say thank you. Leave early if your ribs tighten. Beside her, Sophie pretended not to hear and squeezed her arm once, a benediction disguised as logistics. It helped. At Skyline she didn't look up. She and Sophie moved through crowds and ascended with the other honorees, nurses in borrowed heels, a janitor in his Sunday jacket, Mrs. Lynn with lipstick like a dare. The private gallery smelled of citrus and possibility. Naomi pressed their hands. No speeches, she whispered. Only view and heat and a clipboard for names. She kissed Claire's cheek without flattery. Thank you for letting the numbers be boring. They stepped to the glass. The city sprawled, a field of careful fire. The scaffolds were quiet. Across the room, Nathaniel stood near a column with Julian and no orbit, hands in pockets, tie loosened. He did not move toward her. He looked at the nurses instead, the way a man looks when he has learned where reverence belongs. Ready? Sophie murmured. For what? Claire asked. For whatever the night chooses, Sophie said. We can leave after the first spark. Claire nodded, eyes on the city she had loved and left and returned to differently. She touched the bell in her bag through the cloth of the tote and let it sit there like a secret kept for the right minute. Outside, snow reconsidered the air. Inside, rooms held. Nothing demanded flourish. The hour hand moved toward midnight like a promise that would keep even if no one believed aloud. And Claire, neither red nor white, only herself, stood between glass and sky and did not look back to see who watched her choosing. Chapter 20 Midnight Kept. Part 1, The City That Listens. The gallery filled with the low rustle of winter coats and the soft awkwardness of people unused to being honored. Nurses compared blisters to glitter. A janitor smoothed his jacket as if ironing with his palms. Claire stood with Sophie near the glass, a tote at her feet, the bell wrapped inside like a quiet anchor she didn't intend to ring. Naomi moved through the room and had set grace. No speeches, she reminded the honorees. Names read, a toast, then the view. Perfect, Sophie murmured. Views don't argue. Across the space, Nathaniel stood by a column beside Julian, his attention on the nurses. He didn't look over. He had practiced that. Victoria arrived a few minutes later, winter white and unshowy. She greeted the St. Mary's crew with warmth that didn't need witnesses, then offered Claire a small nod, respect crossing without ceremony. Snow ticked at the glass. The city below breathed heat and money. Someone handed out cards with the schedule, countdown at 11:55, fireworks at midnight, lights on the Orion and surrounding towers choreographed to a score labeled city as harbor. No names. No declarations. Claire relaxed a fraction. Ready to leave after the first spark? Sophie asked. If the air goes wrong, Claire said. If it stays honest, we'll stay. At 11:50, the lights dipped. A curator of voices thanked the people who keep a city from breaking. Names were read. St. Mary's, the volunteers who moved the clinic upstairs, a baker who donated pies, a woman who organized an auction that fed a generator. Claire's name was included without adjectives. She accepted the line the way you accept a cup, glad to hold it, not to own the pot. A soft chime sounded over the speakers. One note, not applause, not a trumpet. The crowd stilled, surprised by the restraint. Claire's chest answered like a small door opening. Text buzzed against her wrist. Nathaniel, if this is too much, know it's for them, not us. I will not approach. If you want a door, text the word door. I'll wait by one. She didn't reply. She slid the phone back into her pocket and kept her eyes on the dark river below. The first fireworks rose not as flowers but as a slow arc of stars, white and low, as if the city had exhaled patience. Then color, brief, exact, no words, only shape. A ring that looked like a bell's mouth without the bell, a line that became a horizon, a soft green wash Claire recognized before she admitted it, North Meadow, almost. She laughed once, unwilling and not unhappy. Sophie leaned in. If he did that, he did it for 1,000 reasons before you. I know, Claire said. Let it be for the nurses. The Orion skin woke in bands, white crowning the spire, red low, then both fading into gold. On nearby rooftops, small speakers released a single sound, the same note as before, spaced a heartbeat apart, moving across blocks like a wave that refused to become a roar. People lifted their faces and listened. Who choreographed silence? Sophie whispered. Someone trying to learn it, Claire said. The program shifted. Images ghosted up the towers, hands passing a box on a hospital loading dock. A line of pies like medals, chair glides sliding into place beneath classroom seats. A breaker door labeled with Joy's neat date. The river photographs fog rendered in light, then gone. No names. Only nouns. Claire's throat tightened. She hadn't given anyone her images. But none were hers alone. She let the feeling be gratitude and not a claim. At 11:59, the lights on the Orion paused on one word in tall, plain letters. Merci. Then the letters dissolved into thank you, then into nothing. No initials. No signature. Claire exhaled. She would not be turned into a pronoun tonight. Text buzz. Naomi, we fought hard for that edit. Happy New Year a minute early. Claire sent a small heart and felt absurdly brave. Midnight happened the way real things do, suddenly and exactly. Fire climbed in precise ladders, then burst into red that wasn't a dress and white that wasn't a promise, then gold that forgave both. The room counted down, soft and stubborn. Hugs landed. A nurse cried and then laughed at herself. Someone said, may we be boring and safe. The bell inside Claire's tote stayed still. She liked that. Nathaniel didn't move. He talked with an old facilities manager about heating vents. Victoria slipped out with a quiet goodnight. Julian lifted a brow at Claire from across the space, an offer to escort, a promise to vanish. Claire shook her head and stayed where she was. The after program began, music with opinions, trays with citrus. Claire checked her watch. She could go. She had kept her own weather. She reached for her tote. A hand touched her elbow, not claiming, only asking for attention. Denise. Come, the nurse said. There's something. They wove to the far window where the Orion faced the river. Below, a ribbon of drones rose from the barge. Simple, white points arranging themselves into a map of the city's wards. A dot blinked over St. Mary's. Another over the community hall. Another over the block where the Willow House sat. The dots pulsed together once like a heartbeat. A voice, unidentified low, came over the speakers. To the rooms that held when the weather did not, thank you. That was all. The drones dimmed. The crowd exhaled. Denise pressed her hand to her mouth and then to Claire's shoulder. That was ours, she whispered. Claire nodded, eyes hot, the good kind. She thought of the seam in the stair, of Joy's label, of the teen who counted to 20, of the fox trotting like punctuation. Her phone buzzed again. Nathaniel, door? Then no pressure. Just logistics. There's a service terrace if you need air. She stared at the word and wondered how many ways a man could learn to spell restraint. Sophie squeezed her fingers. Go breathe. I'll collect our coats. Claire texted one word, door. 3 dots disappearing. Then south corridor. It's empty. She followed Naomi's directions through a hallway of quiet art, down a flight of stairs to a narrow terrace where snow dusted the rail. He was not there. Good. She stepped into the cold and let the air do what air does when given permission, restore. The city below seemed smaller, like a model draped in icing. The Orion's crown settled to white. The river carried light as if it were driftwood. Footsteps approached and stopped before the threshold. May I come out? Nathaniel asked from inside, voice careful. Yes, she said, surprised at the ease of it. He joined her without closing the door, leaving the heat as an escape route. He didn't reach for her. He stood with his hands on the rail, a foot of honesty between them, and looked where she looked. I tried to make tonight about the rooms, he said, not triumphant. You did, she said. Thank you. A pause the length of a held breath. I also tried to make nothing about us. That wasn't a trick. I know. He nodded, snow dusting his hair. I don't know how to stop wanting what I want. I do know how to stop demanding it. Wind stitched between them, not unkind. Below, fireworks smoldered themselves into memory. Claire listened for the bell that wasn't ringing and found instead the steady beat of her own decision walking toward her. Not yet. But maybe not never. I can't answer anything tonight, she said. I can only say that you listened. That matters. It's enough, he said. I'll keep listening. They stood until cold insisted. Back inside, the corridor flickered with end-of-party disarray, confetti, footprints, the tired happiness of people who had chosen a better noise. Claire picked a stray paper star from the floor and slipped it into her pocket like a receipt for the night. Sophie texted, cars ready. Exit east stair, no cameras. Claire typed back, coming. She looked once more at the city. It looked back and didn't ask for anything. Happy New Year, Nathaniel, she said. Happy New Year, Claire, he answered and did not touch her as she went. Sophie drove them east with the heater low and the radio soft. The city fell behind. The river found its old voice. They said little. Claire palmed the paper star and let it rest. The thermos kept its quiet heat. Willowbrook wore frost when they arrived. Claire stopped at St. Mary's, handed Denise a thermos. For the ones who turned the year under fluorescent light. Denise hugged her and let go. At the Willow House, Claire unlocked to quiet. She set her tote on the long table, touched the bell through canvas and didn't ring it. She turned the dimmer until North Meadow listened. Texts blinked and went unanswered. Naomi, we did it right. Julian, he's home. No after parties, no press. Victoria, May your rooms be full before your words are. Claire slipped the phone away and started coffee. Work was her first yes. She was carrying cups when the door tapped once. Evan, cheeks pink. Happy New Year, he said. I brought the polite hammer. We'll need it, she said. The West Hinge believes in anarchy. They worked quietly. He adjusted a latch, she folded linens. Margaret arrived with scones. The fox crossed, confident as punctuation. At 7:40, Claire's phone lit with a name she did not fear. In your town. May I leave breakfast on the step? No knocking. She read it twice and typed, yes. Then warm your hands somewhere that isn't mine. A gray sedan rolled to the curb. A paper bag appeared, bagels, butter, a note with 5 words. For the Q crew, Happy New Year. Car eased away. At 8, the bell breathed. Nurses came for cups that forgave. The first guests patted down the stair and learned the lobby's grammar. Claire kept moving until the morning settled. Near 9, the door tapped again. She looked up ready to decline, and saw only a scarf, a hesitant hand, and a man already retreating. I'll go, Nathaniel said even. I only came to return something. He held out a brass tag stamped Willow House. Attached was a plain key of his own. Not a claim, he said. A petition. If you ever hand me a spare, this is where it lives. If you never do, I'll carry the tag to remember the door isn't mine. Claire felt the cool metal and knew the year's first truth. She could choose now without betraying then. Come in, she said. For 1 minute. Then I have guests. He stayed beside the door like courtesy made visible. He took in the table, leverage, the paperweight, rosemary and thistle. He didn't reach for her. I'm in love with you, he said plain. Not with a story about you. I want your yes only if it never has to perform. I will keep proving I can live small inside your rooms and large beside your work. If the answer is no, I'll keep the proof and go. The bell didn't ring. Claire felt the sentence as fuel, not spectacle. She thought of wires and lists, of the seam and the fox, of a man who learned to bring filters and silence. She thought of her own no days old and true then. My answer today is this, she said. I choose me first. I choose this house and the people it holds. And I'm willing to try loving you on terms that keep me whole. Something in him eased, not with triumph but relief. Name them, he said. Ask before you arrive. Never post about this room. Bring what's needed, not what dazzles. If I say no, it means no. If I ask for quiet, you make it. You carry keys only when I hand them to you. And you keep learning middle, not just beginnings and endings. I can do that, he said, then added the edit that made it honest. I will fail small sometimes. I will correct fast. Good, she said. She took the brass tag, slid a spare onto it, and closed her fist around both. The weight felt like invitation, not surrender. This is not ownership. It's permission to help when asked. He accepted it like a fragile tool. May I touch you? He asked, quieter than snow. Yes, she said and stepped to him. He smelled like winter and soap, cedar without smoke. The kiss was not a proclamation. It was a first cup after a long night, hot, honest, awake. He kept one hand at her jaw and one braced on the doorframe, as if remembering rooms stand because someone holds them. She rose on her toes into warmth she had earned. They parted because the bell breathed for someone else. Both laughed, low, a sound that belonged inside. He rested his forehead against hers once, brief as a benediction, and stepped back. Go, she said, smiling. Be useful somewhere. Come when the list needs you. I will, he said. Drive safe. Live well, she answered, and watched him touch the post like a promise that knew its size. After he left, Claire set the tag and key in the drawer marked tools. She poured coffee for a guest who liked it pale, handed Mara the morning's change and wrote the day's list fresh. Linens, hooks, keys, call the supplier, thank Naomi, soup, practice grace. At noon the fox crossed. At 1 Mrs. Green approved the stare. In a quiet minute, Claire pressed her palm to the bell and felt it cool and ready. She had chosen work herself and, carefully, the chance to love a man who'd learned to stand beside a door without forcing it open. Outside, the river carried light like driftwood. Inside, the room kept its weather. New Year, same vow. Rooms over rumors, work over spectacle, love that never asks her to be smaller than the quiet she earned. She wrote it on a card, slid it under the willow leaf magnet, turned the dimmer a fraction, and breathed. The house answered by staying. Here. Epilogue, rooms, roses, and the middle. A year remade itself from small things. Filters, keys, names learned at the speed of coffee. On the morning the Willow House turned 1, Claire woke to river mist and the fox trotting the lane like a neighbor. The rooms, hearth, starlings, riverlight, north meadow, breathed like places that knew their jobs. The Q crew list held 6. Mara saved for college, Theo tutored fractions, Lily lettered signs for strangers. Margaret tamed linens. Evan kept things with opinions. Joy wrote inside the breaker door, "You're doing great." The September retreat arrived like a test hidden in a weekend. 5 of Nathaniel's team came with duffels and humility. Ortiz vacationed nearby. Julian made executives carry their own mugs. Nathaniel rented a small place 2 streets over, arrived at 9 with pastries, left at 5 with compost, asked before moving chairs, and spent Sunday's last hour fixing a hinge, because middle matters more than entrances than exits. The metaphors clause stayed in the drawer labeled plumbing, signed and honored. On Monday the evidence was straighter doors and a note on the bell, "Your quiet teaches." In winter the generator at St. Mary's hummed through storms and births. Denise sent photos of orderly chaos. Joy swapped a breaker and penciled inside the metal door, "Thank the people who donated PI. Evidence over myth." Robert wrote 3 columns. 1 mean and stale, 1 admitting he'd misjudged chair glides, 1 calling the Willow House, a place where weather is not the loudest thing. He still hovered, but he also dropped newspapers for packing and a check for the defibrillator fund. Victoria visited twice and once sent linen that felt like honesty. "Small orders deserve respect," the invoice read. She and Claire invented a politeness that didn't pretend away history and traded supplier names without headlines. Spring returned the river its green. Margaret cut roses and declared the garden presentable. White sharing the fence, red learning the dignity of not winning. The red glass paperweight caught light without asking for a caption. Nathaniel learned the town by its errands. He was Nathaniel who brings filters at the hardware, the tall one with the polite hammer at Mrs. Green's, and the man who listens to the nurses at St. Mary's. He failed small. Once he posted a photo of Leverage and deleted it after 3 minutes because the room hadn't consented. Once he arrived unannounced and drove back an hour because the day needed space. He corrected fast. Claire kept a brass tag in the drawer labeled tools and a spare key on it only when she meant it. They did not move in together. They learned each other's middle instead. Shared lists, separate mailboxes, morning texts that said only soup, and copies of schedules traded like kindness. When they argued, it was about lamps or logistics, never about whether Claire's work should become small. He returned to Hamilton and sat farther back. She spoke again and used fewer semicolons. The bell rang once for welcome and not for drama. By autumn, the rooms were busy with mercy and noise. A grandmother en route to chemo, a carpenter between apartments, newlyweds who wanted coffee more than champagne. The long table held board games and budgets. Lily labeled a jar lost things and another found again. Theo learned to read the front door's draft and taped a note, "Check the seam." One night in late December, with snow starting, Nathaniel asked at the long table with the steadiness of a man who didn't need to win. "Not marriage," he said, smiling toward the kitchen. "Not yet. At least 2 streets over. Windows that face the river. I'll sign it. You can keep a key in the drawer labeled tools or not. No pressure. I just want a nearby middle to keep learning." Claire thought of the student she had been in a lecture hall, the assistant she had been under glass, and the woman she had become with a bell. She put his spare on the brass tag and said, "Yes to the middle." Later he left a list on the table, filters, nails, socks, quiet, and she wrote in the margin, "Add patience." He did. Back in Willowbrook, rooms filled when a snowstorm stranded travelers who found at the Willow House soup and spare socks. Claire fell asleep in the office to the hum of a building doing its job. Before dawn, a note slid under the door. "Your rooms hold. Thank you for teaching me middle." And the bell did not ring. It didn't need to. Morning brought frost and coffee strong enough to forgive a night. Claire unlocked and rang the bell once. Mara arrived early. Lily brought a stencil. Welcome is a verb. Theo set out chairs that didn't scrape. Evan measured a shelf. Joy admired a breaker. Margaret arranged scones. Denise rolled by with new parents. Ortiz waved. Lucas named a second plant responsibility. Naomi emailed. Robert held the door. Victoria sent linen cards. Mrs. Green approved the step that used to misbehave. Work, love, rest. The order changed. The vow stayed. Rooms over rumors. Work over spectacle. Love that never asked her to be smaller than the quiet she'd earned. When she forgot, the bell reminded her. When he forgot, she reminded him and he listened. On the anniversary evening, they ate soup at the long table with the people who had built the year. Joy and Evan and Margaret and Sophie and Denise and Julian. Nathaniel poured water. Claire lifted a cup. "To rooms that hold," she said. to work that behaves, to love that keeps the middle. After they stood in the doorway and watched the street learn night. Red and white roses argued softly beyond the porch rail, less like rivals and more like neighbors. Nathaniel touched the post, habit without claim. Filters tomorrow, he said. Lentil tomorrow, she countered. Middle, he added. Middle, she agreed, and let the door swing open to whoever needed a chair, a cup, and a room that knew how to keep its promise.